Dr. Asghar Ali Engineer Memorial Lecture. We are looking forward to a very insightful and enlightening lecture. To proceed with the lecture, I invite the dignitaries on the dais. I request them to take their seats. So the chair, we are expecting him shortly. So he will be here shortly. So I request Professor Sukhdev Thorat, the speaker today, to please come on the dais and be seated.
First. This is second. Yeah. Well, good afternoon. Good evening, rather. Irfan Engineers, the director of the Center for Society and Secularism, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I am really indeed very happy to be here to give a memorial lecture in the memory of one of the important person who has really contributed quite significantly on one of the very important social cause. I do remember that Dr. Ambedkar, in one of his very celebrated speech in Pune, Rana Day, Gandhi and Jinnah, he compared Rana Day with Jinnah and Gandhiji. Please come in, find out some place. Yeah. I was sharing with you the one of the speech of Dr. Ambedkar, which he delivered in Pune on Rana Day, Gandhi and Jinnah. And there he tried to define who is a great person. And I don't want to go into greater detail, but he laid down 3 criteria. One is that a person should be knowledgeable. Ignorant person cannot be a person who can serve society. Knowledge is an important condition, but knowledge can be used for wrong purpose. We have a very long tradition in this country of using the knowledge for wrong purposes. So knowledge should be combined with sincerity, so that you can sincerely, honestly put up the issues before the society. But again, if you are a knowledgeable person and a sincere person, you can be a very excellent armchair professor like me, or like many others. And Dr. Ambedkar would say that the one who uses knowledge and sincerity for the upliftment of the people, their level of living, is the one who is recognized as a great person. I think that by definition, I think Asghar Ali Engineer uses his knowledge, his sincerity to address one particular cause and many causes, and try to bring some change in the society, whatever little, whatever big it is. And therefore, he deserved to be remembered. And I am very happy that I have been invited to give this memorial lecture. Friend, I decided to discuss on this occasion one of the very important issues which was close to his heart, Asghar Ali Engineer's heart, and that is the issue of human rights, that is the issue of secularism. And therefore, I have decided to discuss the issue of why untouchability, caste discrimination and atrocity still persists despite law. I am going to share some of my reflection on causes and persistence and solution. Why this issue? The issue I have decided to speak simply because this has become a very important issue in Maharashtra. Increase in the atrocities after 2030s in a very significant manner, which has led to allegation by some that Dalit register false cases, and therefore there has been a demand that there should be a provision of punishment against those who register false cases in the act itself. Some even went to the extent of saying that the act should be abandoned. And for the first time in a Maharashtra society, which has a very long legacy of being the place of anti-caste movement, I'll refer to that later on, we could see a caste divide, community divide, with a massive mobilization on the street by 2 different communities, the one who oppose and the one who supports. And therefore, I thought it is necessary that this issue is discussed in a more passionate manner, without bringing any emotion into it, and place it on the basis of evidence, so that we can work together and take this issue further. Because Maharashtra has a very great legacy of anti-caste movement, anti-untouchability movement. If you ask me, no other state has such a strong no other state has such a strong legacy of social movement, anti-caste, anti-untouchability movement for the cause of women. I mean, you have to, and the important thing is that the social reformer came from all sections of society. From the Brahmin community, you have the son of Lokmanya Tilak, who in fact set up and social equality organization, which was set up by Dr. Ambedkar, but he set up the office. He showed a courage to invite Dr. Ambedkar and his team to his house and provided a meal and invited a lot of anger from his own family. You have Ranades, you have Sane Guruji. I can name you many of them who have come from the Brahmin background. You have series of them from the Marathas and the OBCs. You can begin with Shivaji, and you can begin with come down to Shahu Maharaj, come down to Mercy Sinde, Patil, Namdev, Tukaram. You can pick up anybody. Gadge Maharaj, Tukdoji Maharaj. There are a series of people, those who have come from Maratha background and the OBC background, who got indulged into the social movement. And of course, among the Dalit, I did not name. Kishan Phaguji Bansot came from Nagpur, More came from Marathwada region, Kamble, Shiva Januba Kamble from Pune, and of course Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. We have this great legacy of social movement, and therefore this caste divide between the community, explain explicitly in caste term, is something which is not the legacy of Maharashtra, and it's a lot more disturbing. And therefore, I decided to bring some clarity and share my thought with you, so that we can discuss this issue together the way others have discussed. I will discuss four themes, address four themes. The first thing will be that what has been the change and what continues in terms of practice of untouchability and atrocities. Atrocity is the main focus. Second, why untouchability and atrocity still persist despite law. You had slavery in USA, and the day the law was passed, within a period of 2 to 3 months, slavery disappeared, and you do not even find the stretches of slavery. Of course, race discrimination persists, but slavery disappeared because there was a law. We had an Anti-Untouchability Act in 1955, and untouchability still persists in a very significant way. So why untouchability and atrocity still persist? That is the issue which will take some of my time. And then lastly, what can we do? What the government can do, at least to minimize, if not to eliminate, or to use Dr. Ambedkar's word, to annihilate the caste, but at least we minimize the atrocity and untouchability. And lastly, then in the course of my discussion, I will try to answer some of the allegations made by some section of the society that Dalit register false cases, and that there should be a provision in the atrocity acts for a penalty against those who file false cases. I will discuss this issue, whether this is legally and morally correct to do. Well, let me come to the some provision in the Constitution and the legal provision very briefly. I would not like to go into greater detail in the section on fundamental rights, but it is good enough for me to mention that Constitution is based on the principle of equality and non-discrimination. There are many other provisions, but these provisions which are concerned with the Atrocity Act and Untouchability Acts are very prominent in the constitutions. That there is no discrimination on the basis of caste, religion, race, gender, or place of origin. It has been very emphatically mentioned. And this is important to mention that this overturned the Manusmriti completely. It negated the Manusmriti completely, which is based on the principle of inequality. But what is important is that because of Dr. Ambedkar, untouchability is also brought into the fundamental rights, and untouchability is prohibited and made a punishable offense. Remember well, untouchability is in a section on fundamental right in the Constitution. Now, as a follow-up of this provision in the Constitution, that constitutions recognize equality, Constitution recognize non-discrimination, that everybody should have equal status, equal facility, equal opportunities, irrespective of social identity. But in practice, you find just the opposite, and therefore, the directive principle of the Indian Constitution put responsibility on the state to pass laws and the policies to achieve the goals set out in the fundamental rights. So you have an equality, you have a principle of non-equality, equality and non-discrimination. How do we remove the discrimination that persists in the society? And therefore, right in 1955, 5 years after immediately I think after the Constitution, Dr. Ambedkar being at the helm of the affair of the Constitution making, began to articulate the Untouchability Act, and Untouchability Offence Act was passed in 1955. It was followed by an Atrocity Act in 1989. I'll come to that in later detail as to why we had an Atrocity Act, despite the fact that we had an Untouchability Act. And the Atrocity Act again was amended a couple of times, but most recently in 2015 by this very government. Now, let me briefly tell you about these two acts, and then I go to the implementation of this act. The Untouchability Offence Act, as everybody knows, I think the Secretary knows very well and other people knows very well. There are people from NGOs here, okay, I think is here, yeah. That it has a minimum provision that all public facilities or private which are for the public, everybody should have equal access. And if the untouchables, former untouchables are denied, there is a punishment. That is the limited provision of the Untouchability Offence Act. It was named as a Protection of Civil Rights Act in 1976 by the committee. Now, in 1989, our government brought in another act called Atrocity Act. Now, why is it that the Atrocity Act is brought in? And what is the difference between the Untouchability Act and Atrocity Act? What government discovered in the course of implementation of the Untouchability Act is that there was an opposition by higher caste to the untouchable seeking an equal right. But that opposition was not democratic. That opposition was not through discussion. That opposition was through violence and atrocities. So therefore, an act was brought in wherein, in the beginning, 23 behavior of the high caste, which involved violence, psychological as well as physical, were considered to be atrocious and subject to punishment. Now, in the amendment of 2015, that forms of behavior has been enhanced to 37 behavior, which are considered to be against the law and which are considered to be atrocities. Now, Supreme Court has very rightly defined these offences. They say that it is a special class. They are not covered by the IPC, Indian Penal Code, or they are not even covered by the Untouchability Act. They are a special class of atrocities, special caste of violence, and offences being shockingly cruel and inhuman. This is a very appropriate word. I do not know whether you are having a look at the video that is put up on the social media. Shockingly, I cannot describe any word. Anyway, I don't want to deviate from that. Please have a look at that video, which is the incidence of only 8-10 days. Now, these are the two acts. The Anti-Untouchability Act provide the Dalit an equal access. In the event of opposition, they have a legal protection. They can go to the court and get the access. But if the opposition by the high caste is in violent form, mental, physical, or otherwise, then also the untouchable have a legal protection, safeguard that they can go to the court. Now, this is the law which is brought in by the government to provide an equal access, an equal right, an equal citizenship right to the Dalit. Now, therefore, the question that arises, why is it that the atrocity and the discrimination still persist despite the enactment of this law? Now, before I do that, let me share with you how untouchability still persists despite the act. I am not talking of atrocity now. I am taking only Untouchability Act, which indicate that in the public sphere and the private sphere, which provide services in the public sphere, the private providing services which are public. For example, Kirana shop, it's owned by private person, but it serves the public. And if there is a discrimination for the Dalit, then it is considered to be a violation. So public government services as well as the private services supplied for the public consumptions are considered to be offenses. And why do they still persist? Now, Anti-Untouchability Act is in practice since 1955. Now, it is very difficult to provide the evidence, and since the discussion in Maharashtra on the street and in the demonstration is surcharged with emotion and slogan, I thought that I must try to bring some facts and boil down to the emotion to a certain fact so that people can listen what exists. Now, I look for the evidence, and fortunately I got a number of studies. They are all in Marathi. I translated them into English. Now, please have a look at that. That act was passed in 1955 by the central government. We fortunately have a study immediately of Vai Taluka in 1958 of 17 villages. This was conducted by Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics. Followed after that, in 1962, we have another study of 25 villages. This was by the Harijan Sevak Sangh. Followed after that, after 8 years of gap, we have another study of 192 villages, Harijan Sevak Sangh and Gokhale Institute combined. Then again, after 10 years, in 1991, of a Marathwada survey conducted by SNDT University, Department of Social Work. This survey is about 95 villages. In 2000, the Action 8 organization in Delhi conducted a survey of 50 villages. They surveyed 500 villages all over India. I was the author of that book, Untouchable and Rural India. Then in 2013, 20 villages were surveyed by my institute, Indian Institute of Dalit Study, and that was confined mainly to economic discrimination. And you have series of data, 2013 to 2016. I pick up only 52 cases submitted by the NCDHR, Ujjwal Uke, he's sitting here, to the parliamentary committee which came here to Maharashtra. This parliamentary committee was touring India for the amendment to the Atrocity Act of 2015. So I think Ujjwal Uke and his friend gave a memorandum with a list of the 52 cases in a detailed manner, so I have taken that. Now let us see what does this tell. Now it is beyond my capacity to tell you that how I can describe this. Therefore, what I will try to do is to summarize and send the central messages of all this study. 1955 to 2016, it's a very long period. And remember well, that if somebody asks me what is your national income, I can immediately tell this is my national income. What is your age? I can tell what is my age. But capturing social relation between the people, between the high caste and Dalit, which are embedded into social relationship and which are of a discriminatory nature, which are only experienced by the Dalit, very, very difficult to capture in the world. But I tried, and what I get is the following. There are 4 generalization I can make with all the limitation, and this generalization of social change in the untouchability are the following. There are many spheres where Dalit have got access without any differential treatment. They can enter into police station, they can walk into post office. So sphere like that, or sit in the bus, they won't face generally discrimination. So there are type of sphere, there are a number of them. I am giving you sample where Dalit really have got an equal access, which they did not have earlier, without differentiation, without discrimination. There is other category that we have found is that there is access, but with a differential treatment of various type, with a discriminatory treatment of various type. You can have an access to well, which is a public well. Nobody can deny. It will be against the law. But in practice, what happened in the villages? That, okay, the high caste will have a first priority, the Dalit will take the water later on. or Dalit would not touch the tap at all, somebody will pour water into their vessel. Or if they take the water from the tap, a high caste person will come and wash and clean up the tap because it is polluted because of Dalit has touched the tap. So you have an access to water, but with a differential treatment, with humiliation, with discrimination. But nevertheless, you have an access. The same story sometime in temples, You can just go in, enter into the temple, but you can't enter into the inside of the temple. You are a panchayat member, you have a legal right to sit and participate, but you sit on the floor or you sit on the chair, that's fine. But you will have a separate cup for yourself to take tea, or if the same cup is used, you are required to wash it. So you get an access, but with a humiliation, with a differential treatment. There are many spheres. I don't have time to go into greater detail, but you get an idea of how things have changed over a period of time. But there are other spheres where there is no access whatsoever. And in fact, in this sphere, which I have said that there is an access with a differential treatment, in many villages you find, particularly in Marathwada, that Dalit do not have entry to the temple, sometimes they do not have a entry to the tap, so they have a separate tap or separate well. So there are spheres where they don't have, public sphere, where they don't have access to at all, access to facilities. Now there are two spheres which you must understand. And those spheres have not changed at all. And that is the private sphere, where law cannot do anything. And the private sphere invariably comes out that there is invariably in all the villages, there is a residential segregation. There is no question of Dalit having a house in the locality of high caste in the villages. So residential segregation remains. The Dalit are not invited inside the house, or there are no inter-dining inside the house. No question of intermarriages, of course. So the private sphere is completely, is a very little change you can see. Now this is the change of untouchability, which means that untouchability has changed in some sphere, but in a very substantial sphere of social relationship of Dalit with high caste, the untouchability and differential treatment and denial of rights still persist. Let me come to atrocity now, very briefly. The atrocity rule, as I said, there are about 23 forms of behavior of the high caste which are considered to be against the law. Now again, I want to give the facts. I don't want to talk about on the basis of emotion. This is Maharashtra data. The prime source is crime in India, which is brought out by the Ministry of Home. And I have again taken 52 cases which are submitted by the NCDHR to the parliamentary committee. So these two set of data gives you an idea what is the incidence of the atrocities. And atrocity has really led to this debate in Maharashtra. Atrocity Act was passed in 1989, but the rules to implement that act was passed in 1995. So we can really begin with 1995 till today. And so I have picked up the data from 1995 to 2015. And what do you find in Maharashtra? That about 22,000 cases are registered by the Dalit during this period, on an average of 1,600 cases per year. In the beginning, in 1995, about 1,602 cases were registered, and they reduced up to 2005. There was a declining trend. But after 2005, the number exceeded 1,000 per year, and it reached to 1,678 in 2013, 1,768 in 2014, and 1,816 in 2015. These are the Crime in India report, which are even brought out by the Inspector General of Police in the report that they submitted to the government. I'll come to that later. Now you can see this, that the atrocity persists. What is important, that there is not a single year when the atrocities are not registered by the Dalit. So atrocities are on rise. There is no year without which the atrocity doesn't happen. So altogether, if you take untouchability, that is denial of equal right to Dalit, that persists despite a positive change, and that at the same time there is opposition by high caste. That is the most difficult part of it. The discrimination persists because there is opposition. And that comes under the Atrocity Act. And that opposition is not democratic. That opposition is not through court. That opposition is not through negotiation. That opposition is through violence of a various type. Now let me tell you very briefly what kind of violence is committed by the high caste on the Dalit. Very briefly, I do not know whether the paper is being circulated or available. The paper is 37 pages long, and you will get entire data. And there, those who are interested should look at the paper. But these are the type of violences: verbal, caste abuse, humiliation, forcibly consume undesirable things such as urinating in the mouth, parading naked, removing mustaches, and shaving heads. Physical violence include attack, abdication, murder, torture, beaten to death, burned to death, cut the body into pieces and damaging property. Community level violence: boycott, arson, riot, fire to house, property and group attack. Then there are sexual violence. Yeah. Sexual assault, sexual harassment, molestation, rape, gang rape, rape in front of relatives, outraging modesty, stripping women naked and parading naked. Because the high caste know that this is the punishment that can hurt most. So hurt heavily where it hurt most, and that is what is being done. Now there are two features I would like to mention, and they are relevant for the sake of Maharashtra also. And these were not earlier. And this new feature is that earlier an individual will oppose equal right to Dalit. But now the trend for last 20 years and in Maharashtra is that the community as a whole is opposing it. So there is a group organization and mobilization which oppose the Dalit having an equal right. And there is a second feature is that there is a multiple atrocities. Earlier possibility you oppose the Dalit and you either assault him or abuse him and leave the matter there. But today, if you look at there is a table in the lecture, is that the atrocity is multiple in nature. You are abused, you are physically assaulted, and sometimes you are killed. So there is a series of things. If he happens to be the victim happens to be a woman, you abuse, you humiliate, you sexually assault, and to hide the crime, you killed. So there are multiple forms of atrocity which are used in a combined form from a group. Now what is the meaning of these two new features? The meaning of these two new features is that the caste group atrocities imply caste animosity that is rising, and caste divide and collective effort and on the part of the community. Now this is not what we are looking for. We are looking for negotiation. We are looking for people coming together and dealing the issue of untouchability together. On the contrary, what we find now, that there is a divide. And in Maharashtra, of course, the divide is of an order which I cannot imagine, that one community against the other community. Now, this is what Atrocity Act is. Now let me come to the question. So I have presented you a story based on the facts. What is the nature of change in caste discrimination or untouchability and atrocities? The summary and the conclusion of this, that there has been a positive change in certain sphere of untouchability, Dalit getting an equal right, but in a very substantial sphere, they continue to face discrimination, sometimes equal access with discrimination, sometimes complete denial, and that the opposition is becoming increasingly violent, antisocial, and the nature of atrocities are something which are shocking in the word of the Supreme Court. Now, the issue is why this exists, why the untouchability still exists. I am only analyzing now what is the role of Atrocity Act or Untouchability Act. Why, despite law, the untouchability still persists, discrimination still persists on a significant, unacceptable level. Now, what I'm going to do is, again, I have picked up 3 sources. Fortunately, I got the 3 sources. 52 cases by NCTHR, Ujjwal Uke. I thank him because he has accumulated all these cases, 52 cases, and very detailed. But one of the most important study, the YESDA study, it is studied by 33 cases of Latur in 2008 and 10, but this is by the lawyer, those who are legal expert, and they have analyzed the implementation of Atrocity Act. Then there is, of course, the report submitted to the Parliamentary Committee, and finally the Rural Development Center of Marathwada. I don't remember the name of Eknath Awad's centers, you know, the famous man. On the basis of this, there's a detailed analysis of the atrocity, implementation of the Atrocity Act. Again, I can't go into greater detail, so I will share with you in a brief, in summary form, as to how the implementation of Atrocity Act happens. This is the main findings that comes out, and this is based on the fact. This is not out of imagination. What comes is the following. Let me tell you one thing. That 1995 Act of Atrocities, 89 Act, has a rule, 1995, and the police administration must follow the rule when atrocity happens. And they have to follow as per the book of law. But what happened is that there is a huge and massive deviation from the rules as far as the implementation of the Atrocity Act is concerned. Now, these are the deviation, and for each of these there is a detailed statistical evidence I have produced in the paper. Please read it. Late registration of FIR, not in prescribed time. There is a prescribed time in the rule, but invariably what is being done is that the registration is being done late. And why it is done late on purpose, I'll share with you later. There is a purpose behind that. Delay in spot investigation. The moment atrocity happens, the police is required to go on the spot and get the actual situation. Appointment of the officer below the rank. There is a requirement in the untouchability rule that a particular level officer should go and not the ordinary person or police. I think DSP possibly at the level of that should go. But normally what happens is that the person below the rank of what is prescribed goes and inquire. Sometimes the trick is being done that the investigation is done by the low rank official, but the high rank official which is eligible will sign. So these are kind of bypassing of the rule. Avoiding registration under the relevant section of POA. Very interesting table. You must read from the ESDA study that the police officer, the administration, registered the case in those clauses of Prevention of Atrocity Act which involve less punishment, or combined with IPC, or sometimes IPC alone. You know that, Khair Lange's case. Whole debate was that it was not registered in the beginning under Atrocity Acts, or the Vemula's case. A lot of opposition for registration. Finally, it has been, some sort of thing has been done. So the administration will deliberately register the case under the clauses which has mild punishment. Late arrest of the accused, or there are a group of people involved in the arrest. You arrest one person, leave the others, and others then put the pressure on the victims, bring pressure and do all kind of activities. They won't arrest all of them. Delay in filing the charge sheet. This is the point which the Inspector General of the Police in their report, I hope you have read, that in reply to the allegation that there are false cases registered by the Dalit, the Inspector General of the Police came with the report submitted to the government of Maharashtra that there is no evidence whatsoever that Dalit register false cases. They say that there is already a provision in the rules that if there is insufficient evidence, they take out those cases. And they gave the figure that 5 to 6% of the registered cases are already taken out by the police, and 95% cases which the police consider to be reliable are then registered. So there is no issue of registering false cases. The allegations are not based on the facts, in fact. But that filing is also very, very late, and the Inspector General of the Police came with the conclusion that the incident happened now and the case is filed after 6 months or 7 months. There is a difference in the statement given by the victim at the time of filing the FIR and then in the court, and that itself is good enough for acquittal, because these poor people who are harassed do not remember what they had said in the beginning and what they have said now. In fact, Inspector General of the Police came with a recommendation that they are going to run the mock court now. Before a final case is come for hearing, they will teach the accused the victim, what they wrote in the FIR and what should they speak in the court. Now, so all kind of complications come because of delays in filing. Untimely and inadequate relief, I won't go into that case issue in greater detail, and high pending rates. 80%, 60% of the cases are pending. Now, let me come to the major issue now. The debate in Maharashtra, in the newspaper, is that there is a low conviction in Maharashtra, and there is a group of people who are arguing that this low conviction is there because false cases are being registered. So high acquittal rate or low conviction rate is low because the false cases are registered. Therefore, large number of people, say 94% of the cases are just acquittal. So here is a statistic. You can see that during 2001 to 2013, the conviction rate is the lowest in Maharashtra. It varies from 1.8 to 8.2%, and annual average is 4.7. So in Maharashtra, of the total cases registered by the Dalit with the police, only 4% or 5% are convicted, which means 95% are acquitted. And the argument is then put forth by a group of people that since the 95% are acquitted, it means the cases are false. Now look at the national average. National average conviction rate is 30%. 54% in UP, 46% in Rajasthan, Uttarakhand, 30% in Madhya Pradesh and Jharkhand, and 37% in Chhattisgarh. As against this, Maharashtra is only 6%. Now, why the conviction rate is low? Is it because of false cases or it is because of something else? Now, this is the question that I am going to answer soon. The reason for the low conviction is the willful negligence by the administration. This is the statement of the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment Parliamentary Committee. I am giving in the beginning before I go for the evidence. What does the report say? The official attempt to dilute the spirit of the act at every stage. Look at the sentence, very strong sentence, at every stage. From non-registration of the case, failure to investigate according to due process of law, not filling the charge sheet in court within the stipulated time, not giving relief and compensation to the victim, not providing protective and preventive measure etc. Friends, this is not my conclusion. This is the finding of the parliamentary committee, which is a statutory committee. After surveying all this act and moving around the country, that this is the conclusion that they have, this is the reason that they have given for a low conviction rate. And I believe I am providing you now evidence and facts as to how this committee is correct. And in Maharashtra, if the conviction rate is 5%, it is not because that the Dalit filed the false cases. There is no evidence whatsoever about that. It is because of the willful negligence by the administration to provide a safeguard to the people of their social belonging. That's the conclusion. Look at one by one. The willful negligence means you keep the loopholes in the filing of the cases, and those loopholes are carried to the court, and the court make use of it. And on large amount of cases, 95% of the cases are acquitted simply because on the procedural ground, not on the substance of the case. Procedural ground. That the visit was not made in this period, that the case was not filed in a specified period. So all procedural grounds are used for an acquittal. Late registration of a FIR is the reason for acquittal. Imagine. Forget about the case. Delay in spot investigation is considered as a reason by the court. Appointment of an officer below the rank. If they discover that the case was investigated by the officer below the rank, which is prescribed in the law, it is acquitted. Avoiding to mention caste background. You know, sometimes they deliberately do the administration. You have to mention the caste of the person who is a victim, scheduled caste, another is a high caste. It is in the rule that the accused should be from the high caste and the victim should be from the scheduled caste. Then it can be a case which is under the Atrocity Act. On purpose, the name of the caste of the victim is not given. Sometime of accused not given. The case falls in the court. Straightforward. Late arrest. One arrest, leaving other, and what happened? Then there are counter cases by the high caste against the same person. The high caste would file a counter case against the victim to terrorize him or her, And what are those cases generally? The report brings out, these are the cases related to gender violence. The Dalit has indulged into a gender violence, sexual violence. And both the cases are then heard. Same court possibly heard both the cases and the atrocity case is weaker. Now these are the reason for the low conviction rate. And what committee has said is that much of the blame goes to the administrator, much of the blame goes to the bureaucracy. I have a wonderful statement by Dr. Ambedkar, not here but in the paper, that he had said that how bureaucracy behaves and how administration behaves as far as the untouchable and Dalit are concerned. So conviction rate is low because of willful negligence by the official, resulting into high acquittal on procedural ground and not false cases, as has been argued by here. The IG police report mentioned only delay in filing charge sheet as a reason. This is the limitation of the IG report also. Only reason is given is the delay in filing in charge sheet, and there is a difference of opinion. There is a difference in the first statement and the last statement. They observed that only 5 to 6% of the cases they eliminate at the source. 90% of the cases they think are based on the evidence. But this is only one reason. Difference in the statement in the beginning and the end is the one reason. There are many other reasons, and prime reason is the willful negligence and counter pressure by the accused. So crux of the matter is the working of the government administration. Now let me come. This is what the story which emerged on the basis of the facts. Now the another argument is made that assuming that large majority of the cases are registered in a false way, then it is argued that Atrocity Act should be amended and a provision should be made in that very act that if some Dalit registered the false case, he or she should be made punishable offense. Now is this suggestion justifiable on legal and the moral ground? In my opinion, it is not justified on any of the ground as a matter of fact. Now let me share with you, again government, because I might be said that I am interpreting myself. When the Atrocity Act came for an amendment, it goes to the Standing Committee of the Parliament, which is attached to the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment in Delhi. And that committee really is given the job of looking into the amended act. The suggestion which are made to amend the Atrocity Act, which was approved by the Parliament in 2015, but a year prior to that, the whole process was started, and Parliamentary Committee is the key body which gives the recommendation. This Parliamentary Committee asked the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment in Delhi. Let me repeat. The Parliamentary Committee member asked the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment that we have received complaint that of false cases, therefore there should be a provision in the Act for the punishment against those who register the false cases. This is the reply of the Ministry, and I'll read it for you. The object of the POA Act is to prevent the commission of offences of atrocity against the member of the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribe. It will thus not be in consonance with the intent of the POA Act to provide for a punishment for a member of SC and ST for registering cases falsely. Relevant section of the IPC can, however, be invoked for dealing with the specific false cases. This was the opinion. Ministry refused and advised the Parliamentary Committee, you cannot provide the provision in the same act. It will nullify the very purpose of providing justice to the victim, and namely the Dalit. But I have looked into the other literature. Legal and moral ground. First is, let us take a moral ground. Who need a protection? Is the accused who is economically and demographically strong enough in a village, in Maharashtra, everywhere, Dalit account about 13% of population, in some 10% of population, some 7%, in some cases maybe 17, 18. Demographically, Dalit are in minority. Economically, they are the most weakest. Of the total household in rural area, 65% are wage laborer, completely dependent on the high caste, land-owning communities. Can demographically a community which is in minority and completely dependent on the high caste for a survival will dare to register false cases? We are living in a world of imagination. I'll come to that, what Dr. Ambedkar has to say. So I don't think factually this argument is correct. But morally, who needs the protection? Protection is needed, additional protection is needed. Morality demands that the protection is given to the weak and not to the strong. Here the demand is to give the protection to the strong. What is misuse of law in the law? Misuse of law is that the law is not being implemented, and it is implemented in favor of those who are in a strong position. That is the misuse. Misuse is not for the accused or the victim. You look at the gender rules and regulation. Gender rules and regulation are so much in favor of women, because woman is in a weak position, cannot provide evidence. If it destroy her career, so the law is in her favor. The morality of that favor of law is that you are giving extra protection to the weak. Dalit are so damn weak in the villages. So I don't think in moral ground it is justified, this demand. But on legal ground also, if you take USA, you take Canada, you take Northern Ireland, and you take other countries where South Africa, where a large majority, a section of discriminated group is there, nowhere there is a provision of penalty against the accused, against the victim, in that very law. There are other provisions. I think the ministry has rightly said that you have IPC, go under defamation of act. You have other clauses where the accused, if he thinks that this case is false, you can make use of it. But how can you suggest that the provisions should be in the same very act if there is a provision of punishment for a false registration of the case? No Dalit will dare to even register a case, because it will be easy in consonance with the administration, in support with the administration, to prove that the case is false. The evidence shows that 95% of cases are subject to acquittal. So I think this demand is not correct. Let me come to now. Now I think I have given you the factual story. That untouchability changed, but it persists. That there is a violent opposition by the high caste for untouchable seeking the equal right. The number of cases registered. Now if law has not helped, and even social movement in Maharashtra, despite its leadership, what should be done? I think the law should continue, certainly, but there is a need that we must take certain steps. I am extremely happy that Honorable Secretary of Social Justice is here, Director of Balti is here. I think these are some of the suggestions I present before them and present before everybody. What are the present solutions? Let us review the present solution. The present solutions are legal, 2 Act, Untouchability Offence Act and Atrocity Act. Then the measure for economic empowerment. Reservation policy is one of them. That is to give them some space in job, education and politics, because in a normal course they won't get it because of discrimination in job and education and in politics. And the third solution that is used is increase the social awareness and again the untouchability, sensitize people. Now let me share with you the important things and the limitation of this solution. And that limitation itself is the reason as to why untouchability and atrocity persist. Legal safeguard and their limitation, the law. Now laws are necessary, but Dr. Ambedkar would argue that laws have their limitation in dealing with the issue of untouchability because of one particular reason, not that law are not necessary. Now I'll read this sentence, this is very important. This is again in Ranade Gandhianjina. Dr. Ambedkar argued that if individual commit an offense, law is very effective. You file a case against the individual and provide the evidence, the court will take care of it. But if the community as a whole discriminate, then the law fails. Dr. Ambedkar says, prevalent view is that once rights are enacted in the law, that is just like Untouchability Act, then they are safeguarded. This is an unwarranted assumption. Rights are not protected by law, but the social and moral conscience of a society. If social conscience is such that it is recognized the right which law chooses to enact, right will be safe and secured. When the community as a whole practice discrimination, then the law became less useful instrument. I continue this quotation. But if the fundamental rights are opposed by the community, this is Dr. Ambedkar, and look at the sentence, no law, no parliament, no judiciary can guarantee them in the real sense of the word. And he quote Brooke, one of the leading philosophers, there is no method found for punishing the multitude, means many, if they practice discrimination. Law can punish a single solitary criminal, as I said. It can never operate against a whole body of people who are determined to defy it. That is what is happening in Maharashtra. A whole body of people practice discrimination in a village for several years. And that is why law fails. Law cannot be an useful instrument, however necessary it is, useful instrument when the community as a whole practice discrimination. And therefore Dr. Ambedkar says, social conscience is the only safeguard of all the right, fundamental or non-fundamental. Now we have to recognize the limitation of this law and therefore take the decisions. Now let me come and discuss what is social conscience. Now, social conscience is the thing, but these are moral principles which tells you what is wrong and what is right. And you then follow the right. Now, social conscience, if you are social conscious and you are thinking, your norms and principle of your behavior, if they are supportive of equality, liberty, fraternity and fraternity, then it will be possible to give the right to the Dalit. Otherwise not. Now, what are the existing provisions? Existing provision is that the Constitution provides for a social justice, equality, liberty, freedom and fraternity to everybody. But old one, which is persisting, norms and customs, they support inequality, antisocial attitude and unfreedom. You know that individual liberty is being challenged in wearing of cloth, in selecting your partners. Constitution guarantee you the liberty and individual freedom. In practice, this is being opposed. So there is a conflict between the constitutional principle of equality and the old-based caste inequality. Old continue and community as a whole. So continuation of the denial of equal right to the untouchable is thus the outcome and the absence of social consciousness, social conscience in favor of the laws supporting of equality. This is the explanation for persistence of untouchability despite law, since whole community denies and law fails. Now this is the crux of the matter. That our social conscience, our behavior in the villages is determined by the law, by the norms and the principle and the custom and the habit and the values, which is in favor of inequality. And that evidence I have given to you. Residential segregation, denial of equal right to scheduled caste. So people are not wrong here. I'll come to that later, what Dr. Ambedkar said. People are not wrong. And don't blame the people. The norms and principle and the custom which decide their behavior toward the untouchable are wrong. And it is this norm and principle which do not allow them to develop a social conscience in favor of equality. So if you have to have right social conscience, the social reform movement you need there. How do you change the norms and principles which are still supportive of inequality and about which we haven't done? After Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar left for a couple of years, yes, but thereafter the anti-caste movement and anti-untouchability movements is completely on the back seat. There are other instruments that we have used. So social conscience supportive of inequality also draws support from religion. This is what Dr. Ambedkar said. The most difficult part is that you have a racism in USA, but Christianity doesn't support racism in the test. It is a different matter that Christianity follows the colonizer, supported them in a way. So they are equally responsible for the racism and slavery in the USA or elsewhere. But if somebody tries on the basis of the religious principle of Christianity, they don't get a support for poverty or they don't get a support for racism. Here, our entire religious philosophy and social philosophy supports caste inequality. Caste is a divine institution, created from the part of the bodies of the Brahma. Four castes emerge from the four parts of the bodies. It's a divine, godly institution. Now people believe that this is the divine institutions. And therefore, removal of caste and untouchability became extremely stubborn institution, an extremely difficult institution because it has a religious root. That was the difference between Gandhiji and Ambedkar, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. Gandhiji would say caste system and untouchability are appendixes of the Hindu religious philosophy. Babasaheb would say no. Caste and untouchability had a philosophical foundation in the hardcore philosophy of Hinduism. You pick up Rigveda, you have Purushatta, which talks about four varna. You pick up Gita, it talks about four varnas. You pick up Ramayana, it talks about caste system. You pick up Mahabharata, it talks about caste system. And forget about the Smritis. You have the classical example of Manusmriti, or you take all other Smritis. So the whole literature, there is a chapter by Dr. Ambedkar, Brahminical literature, and read that. The whole literature is there where every literature supports the social organization, and it is rightly. That is the social system of the Hindus. So there is a religious foundation to the caste system, and that is why it became a lot more difficult. Therefore, what is the agenda? The social agenda should be then to help people to discard inequality supportive norms and principles and transform them into one supportive of equality. Develop social consciousness of the people that will be supportive of equality. Law is the key issue for social reform by the government in the state and even for the civil society. Now, the social reform essentially means then, how do you transform the norms and principle of the behavior of people which are supportive of inequality? Don't blame the people in rural area. Dr. Ambedkar has a very classical sentence. People's actions are the result of the principle that they believe in. And the principle and norms in which the people believe is in support of caste system. So if you want to change, don't blame the people. Change the norms and the principle that guide their behavior. For my institute, I have made a 8-hour documentary going to different places. A young director from Bombay has made this. And he asked everybody, and it come out quite clearly that rural people are absolutely honest. And they tell about it, that why do we observe the caste system. Now, therefore social reform is the one that I said. Now there is one point I will make, and I will stop this issue of reform of this legal system. So far what we have done is, we have provided a safeguard to the victim, that is to the Dalit. Here is the Untouchability Offence Act. If you are stopped, you can make use of that law. Here is the Atrocity Act. If you are attacked violently or otherwise, you can go to the court of law and seek a protection. So law provides you safeguard to have an equal access. Now Dalit do that. That is how the cases are there. But we haven't done much about the accused. The one who practiced discrimination, the one who used violence, we have not focused on that. We have not realized that he or she is the source of discrimination. And how do we change them? That we have not touched at all. So social reform for changing the behavior has remained in the backward seat. That is why equal focus is necessary on the accused. Those who practice discrimination for a change in their social behavior toward the untouchable. They themselves are victims. Dr. Ambedkar in Annihilation of Caste has clearly said, don't blame the people, blame their norms, blame the religious ideas, notion which they bring with them and practice discrimination. So they themselves are the victim. People are not essentially by heart wrong. What is wrong is their norms and principle and the religious notion that they carry. So the government has a less engagement with the people who practice untouchability, and I think the social reform movement, my suggestion is, and even Dr. Ambedkar's suggestion, I'm drawing from there, really there is nothing much I can add to what Babasaheb has said, that focus on social reform means change the norms, principle which govern the behavior of the people. And since it has a base in the religious philosophy, please address that aspect also, to the extent possible. This is the quotation, and I'll end this portion. People are not wrong in observing caste, but their belief in Shastra, which has inculcated this notion of caste. We must grapple not the people, but the ideology, supportive of caste, which induce them to follow caste, annihilation of caste. The real remedy is to destroy this belief which continue to mold the belief and action of the people. The act of the people are merely the result of their belief, incalculated upon their mind, and that people will not change their conduct unless they cease to believe in the religion of caste, annihilation of caste. That is the crux of social reform, which we have, after mid-60s, 70s, we have really forgotten. Now let me come to the one more point, and then I will stop. What is discrimination? Discrimination is an idea. Yeah, idea is being created that the people are created by the God into 4 classes, and each one has got some rights, and those rights are unequally distributed, and untouchable do not have right. Right to property, right to education, and no civic right. This is an idea which was put into practice. So you attack the idea. When I said social reform, you really criticize the idea. But that's not enough. The reason is, beside ideas and principle, economic power matters. There is economic foundation to the ideas. There is economic power with the high caste, which enable them to discriminate. So motive, let us see what is the motive behind the discrimination or denial of equal right. The motive is, of course, a high social status, but motive is also economic. All sources of income, asset, land, enterprises, education, employment should be with us and not with them. In the test, I am not talking of the present reality, in the test it is clearly mentioned. Now why is it that those rules are formed? That I will have all economic right and you won't have? It's fine that you can have that, I should have an economic right, but why do you deny to others? And why you put even punishment? If you try to take land, or if you try to have an access to education, why do we make that provision? The intention is quite clear. The intention is that we should have maximum economic power so that we enjoy it, and we can only enjoy it at the cost of others. If others do not have, then we will have. If others have, our share gets reduced. Now that is why both civic right and economic right, and particularly to untouchable, there is no property and education. Which means that the caste discrimination has economic foundation, remember well. Along with the change of ideas, what we require is the change of the economic foundation of the caste system. And that is what Dr. Ambedkar did. Reservation was one of the reasons. Give them job, give them education, give them share in the politics. So economic empowerment of Dalit is very, very important, because the caste discrimination foundation is also not only in ideas but also in economics. Now let me bring you the experience of other countries as to how economic power is the foundation of discrimination. There is a rampant discrimination, there was, and they continue to be there in USA and other countries. But USA is the only country where they developed the theories of discrimination. These are all Nobel laureate. Baker in 1956 produced a book, Economic Discrimination. And there he talked of discrimination of race and gender. Chicago University refused to publish the book of Baker. Finally, he managed to publish the book from Chicago University, and he got a Nobel Prize for that book. The world knows about it. Arrow, another Nobel laureate, he developed an economic theory of discrimination. Akraloff, who is still alive, he developed a theory of discrimination. Bloomer, Darity, African-American economists. What is the sum of their argument? The sum of their argument, which can be applied which Dr. Ambedkar has very easily applied. He didn't read these. These are the theories developed in the 60s and the 70s when Dr. Ambedkar was no more, but his theories are almost similar to that of these people. What is the motive behind the discrimination? The motive behind discrimination is economic power, economic greed. And that is land, that is industry, that is capital, that is education. And Dalit will not have anything. I hope whether you have read that famous prescription by Manu, that the only job of the untouchable, Shudra's word at that time, only job of Shudra is to serve the high caste. And among the high caste, the best thing for them would be that they serve the Brahmin. They cannot accumulate wealth, they cannot have access to education. I am literally quoting from Manusmriti. Why should somebody make this provision and take all the power to ourselves? The reason is the economic motive. Now, all this economic theory based on race, gender, why is it that the male are opposing the reservation to the woman in parliament? Very slowly. They constitute 52% of the state population, India's population, and they are only 10% in the parliament. They are asking, let us give at least 30%. They are not willing, very reluctant. The reason is because we will lose our seat. So it's a question of give and take. And discrimination here is beside the social status. And develop an idea is also for the economic motive. Now, therefore, this makes very, very difficult for the Dalit to seek the justice. Let me finally finish with this before I come to the suggestion. That if economic motive is the power of continuing discrimination, then what is the situation in the villages? The situation in the villages is such that the Dalit cannot afford to get us justice. Very slow speed. Most of the atrocity happen in the villages. The economic and demographic imbalances in the villages is such that the Dalit cannot access the equal right. What are the economic imbalances? I'll give the statistic later, but let us look at the foresight of Dr. Ambedkar. In state and minorities, he said, and let me read for you, that the Hindus most often succeed in suppressing the untouchable in villages is due to many causes. The chief weapon in the armory of Hindu is the economic power which they possess over the poor untouchable living in the villages. How true he is. It is a fight between economically and demographically weak Dalit and strong high caste. 15% of Dalit, 70% of high caste. 65% of Dalit who are wage laborer, and most of the landowner are high caste. The fight is between the very two, strong and weak. Now, what Dr. Ambedkar described in 1946, even today, is true. In rural area in Maharashtra, I look at the figure, the Dalit account 15% of the population. Buddhist, and if you take Buddhist, scheduled caste Buddhist and the Hindu Buddhist, Hindu scheduled caste, it's about 15%. While the population of high caste in the village is 75%. Economically, in 2012, of the total household of Dalit, 60% of Dalits are wage laborer dependent on high caste for livelihood. How can they fight? To say that they can file false cases is something which nobody can understand. Economically, demographically, extremely weak group cannot fight and cannot get. Therefore, their struggle have been suppressed. There are series of incidences in Maharashtra where there is a violent attack against the Dalit. You know, renaming of Marathwada University, what happened in Marathwada. So, what Ambedkar says is, we remain true, that in the village, because of the imbalance in demography and economics, it's difficult for Dalit to get the right. And therefore, he suggested this. I'll elaborate later on now in last 15 minutes. Therefore, he suggested separate villages with an independent means of livelihood. Now, let me come some of my thinking, and I want to share with you what we additionally should try to do to at least minimize, if not eliminate untouchability and atrocity. The first thing that I think government of Maharashtra should do is to give a top priority to the eradication of untouchability. At the moment, the issue of untouchability is very much less on the agenda of the government. There are little campaign, that's all. But beyond that, like a poverty, untouchability, from which I think 15% of Dalit, of course, suffer, but 27% of OBC to a certain extent suffer in some areas. It has to be brought on the priority. Poverty is, of course, a daily hunger and lack of food. But untouchability is a day-to-day humiliation of the 15% of the population. The statistics shows you only part of the story, but day-to-day experiences of humiliation and denial of right. So untouchability will have to be taken, has to be taken a highest priority. Second, we do not know. We have a scheduled caste commission, and you ask them, what is the status of untouchability? They have nothing to offer. I asked the chairman of the SC commission, and he sent me the district-wise number of cases registered by Dalit. That's all. The studies that I have quoted to you, 7, 8 studies, these are by the private organization. The Atrocity Act in India requires the state to conduct the regular survey to know the status of untouchability every 5 years. Not a single survey, to my knowledge, I should be corrected by the government office, not a single survey has been conducted regularly of the untouchability, not atrocity, untouchability in the villages, so that we know that untouchability has reduced in this pair, but it persists in this pair. So let us focus on this. But no surveys, because it's not on priority. On priority is something else. Now, of course, effective implementation of the PCR and PO, Protection of Atrocity Act, I don't want to spend on that time. All those limitations that I have mentioned will have to be overcome. I think the state government required to set up a committee and look into the working of the Atrocity Act and come with the proposal whereby how we can implement the act effectively. There are ways which we can do. I have certain ways. I have certain suggestions, but this is not the time. But I think we can minimize those limitations in the implementation of the Prevention of the Atrocity Act. But we also need the approach that is followed by the South Africa, healing and reconciliation. You know, as Baba Sahib has rightly said, that law is helpful to the individual criminal. You can punish him. No, here is 70% of the community in the villages which practice discrimination against the Dalit who are isolated, separated. And on a day-to-day basis, there is a tension. There has to be dialogue. If the high caste are victim of their own ideology and deny and commit atrocity on Dalit, I think they themselves suffer. Therefore, what South Africa has done is to brought the people together. Whenever something happens, they bring the people together and make them to talk that how some are wrongs, confess their mind, introspect. That is how they have done. That's how Mandela could bring the black government in South Africa. But it was to reconciliation. I think the government has to use this remedy also. Law, yes, but reconciliation, bringing the people together, talking to them that, look, this is what Constitution says, this is what you are practicing. Change it to the extent possible. Don't do it. If you have a problem, here is a law, here is a discussion, here is a panchayat office where you can discuss, but don't use atrocity. I think some program will have to be developed by the government. I think the responsibility of enforcing Untouchability Act is to some extent on the villages, but I think more responsibility is necessary to give the panchayat. It is the village which is the stage where atrocity happens, where everything happens and discrimination prevails. I am not talking of rural discrimination in the bureaucracy, discrimination in the employment, in the government jobs. That's another area. The urban scene is quite different. Nobody has studied. We need a lot of things there. You have seen the decision of the High Court yesterday. They have discontinued the reservation in promotion, not realizing that there is a whole lot of discrimination that the Dalit face in bureaucracy. So urban area is completely different. We will see that later. But I am talking of rural, that panchayat is an institution at the village level which should be made use of. Those who are representative, high caste representatives should be told that, look, in your village there should not be an untouchability in a public sphere. That if there is a possibility and potential of the atrocity and violence, please take care of it. Solve through discussion. An untouchable boy and a high caste girl, when they have some relationship for marriage or for whatever reason, and you see a potential, it is here that the panchayat should intervene. Bring the parents of the boy and parents of the girl and village and sit and solve the issue amicably. That is reconciliation. So the panchayat should be given the responsibility. At the moment, there is nothing much at the panchayat level. There are two more drastic suggestions. These are not mine, these are Dr. Ambedkar's. And this is separate settlement of the untouchable to begin with. Dr. Ambedkar, through his rigorous academic analysis, came to the conclusion that in the village setting, where untouchables are less in number and dependent on high caste, economically, there is no chance that untouchable will get this equal access. Therefore, he suggested separate villages for the Dalit with an independent source of income. So he wants disconnect, geographical and economic disconnect between the high caste and the low caste. There is a whole lot of discussion, and he repeated 3 times, remember well. He repeated in a paper that he submitted to the specific conference, published as Gandhiji and Untouchable. and repeat it in the state and minority. And in state and minority, there is a whole justification as to why he is asking for separate villages. In fact, he went to the extent of saying that I may be blamed as a separatist, but if this suggestion is not accepted, what you will have is the slavery. And that is what precisely happening in the villages in Maharashtra. For last 30, 40 years, untouchability atrocity continues because his analysis is right. Something must be done. I think Maharashtra government can start a separate settlement, at least for those villages where the population of scheduled caste is small and that the taluka and the district is prone to atrocities. So some step will have to be taken. The most important which Dr. Ambedkar has suggested is the following. That is 10-year program to settle the Dalit in the cities and town. If you look at the economic theory of Dr. Ambedkar, he emphasized on industrialization and urbanization, migration of the Dalit from the rural to the urban areas. Because in urban area, there might be a discrimination, but there is no violence. There is no day-to-day humiliation and condemnation. And therefore, he favored the shifting of Dalit from the rural to urban area. I think, I have a feeling, my suggestion is that the government should try, that gradually over a period of 10 to 15 years, if there can be a plan of shifting Dalit to the cities, so that geographical and economic disconnect happen. Now this is not impossible, this is possible. Dalit face immense pain, remember well, in the village. Our notions are such that we don't mind inequality at all. We don't talk about that. Do we discuss that in all the villages untouchable live separately? There's a residential segregation. We don't mind it at all. That is our notion, that those are our values about which we are not sensitive at all. Therefore, you place them in an atmosphere where there won't be a day-to-day humiliation. We did that experiment at the time of partition of Pakistan. We bought all people, Hindus from Pakistan, give them the land, give them the money. 30,000 rupees, here is a plot of land, it's up to you. Dr. Ambedkar is not suggesting which is something is not practicable. But if you want to free untouchable from day-to-day humiliation, I think his suggestion, these are not my suggestion. Remember well, these are Dr. Ambedkar's suggestion in state and minorities. And I am only reinterpreting on the basis of the last 30 year, 35 experience that how correct he was in his analysis of the problem. The program of economic empowerment is another thing. That at least for the new settler in the cities, you have to have a public employment program. Now, this government, the Honorable Prime Minister has announced the mega housing scheme. Let us plan that in each district and each taluka, when I am talking of urbanization, I am not talking of Bombay. There are 576 towns, small, big and large town. The towns are of 5 categories. 557 or so. So plan the shifting and settlement of Dalit in every town. Give them the land, give them the money. They will put their money and they will have their own settlement. But plan some jobs, public employment, so that they have an independent source of income and a separate existence. There are many things which I am not sharing with you. If this is the animosity between the two groups in Maharashtra now happening, imagine the economic discrimination of the Dalit. Will they get the job in the factories owned by this group? Imagine. The unemployment rate in Maharashtra is about 4 to 5% at the state level. The unemployment rate of the scheduled caste is 13%. 4 to 5 times higher, based on 2011 and 12 unemployment report, national sample survey. OBC is 6%, Muslim is less, but untouchable is 13, 14%. In fact, in the age group of 15 to 29, it is 16%. Why? Because they face discrimination in jobs. If this kind of animosity and social conflict, who will give them the job? So the best remedy is to throw them into the urban area, give them the housing, give them some money, let them start business, but provide public employment to them. Now the last one I will add is that we still need an education program against untouchability and caste discrimination by the state. This state has to do the program of education to adopt, to promote moral principle which support equality. What need to be changed? The need to be changed is belief in norms which are supportive of untouchability. Belief in community level policing with punishment, shockingly cruel and inhuman. Now, we are aghast, we are silent. The kind of atrocities and physical violence going on, community level violence, Una, the lynching of the boys, you cannot imagine. Saharanpur. Now, if you see the video that is being circulated now, I don't have a courage to share with you, but I will share with you. Under the moral policing, the couple is caught sitting together. Both of them paraded naked, boy and a girl. The boy is asked to take the girl on his shoulder. He did that for half a furlong, collapse on the ground. Then girl is asked to carry the boy. So we are not paying attention to this. Why our society is behaving like this? Why it is shockingly cruel and inhuman, which the Supreme Court said. The reason is the following. Again, people are not wrong. But the moral and the norms based on Manusmriti and not on constitution is the reason. In my article, I have given the entire punishment that have been suggested by Manu. Physical punishment. And the punishment that untouchable face now, there is a close similarity. So people are not wrong. What they are doing is what their Shastras are teach them. The instrument of enforcement of caste is the following. This is in Manusmriti. And that is called in sociology, is called is social ostracism. That is economic and social boycott and exclusion. That is the instrument. And this is not only for untouchable, this is for the community people also. In Haryana, you know that. A particular high caste girls, if marry a Dalit, that family of high caste is excommunicated. That is the instrument which is prescribed in Manusmriti. And of course, for Dalit, it is economic and social boycott. It is going on in Marathwada for last 4 months. It is going on in Andhra Pradesh for last 4 months. There are the village people who are sitting in the Jantar Mantar in Delhi. Now, the point that I want to convey and emphasize against on you is this, that the community level violent action and policing, is something which people do because it is mentioned in the Manusmriti and it is in their subconscious mind. That this is what we have done, dandaniti. The community can do it. Otherwise, why they are doing? They are not imagining the solutions on their own, because this has been written in the text and it is passed on. It's the legacy of the past, which is spill over to the present and implemented by the youth. Now, you will have to teach this through education. Education is an instrument. America is doing, let me tell you. I don't have a time. For higher education and school education, their argument is that with 99% student going to the first class, enrollment ratio in the school education is about 99-98%. In our state also is very high, about 89%. If all the boys goes to the school, remain there for 4 years, that is the laboratory where you can change his thought, sensitize him. Part of them go to higher secondary, part of them go higher education. So educational can be used to change the norms and values of the student, because their norms and values are taught in the family and society, which are in support of inequality. What we do? Moral principles, NCC. Beyond that we don't go. We don't face the reality. We don't tell them. America has introduced a course in colleges which is compulsory for every undergraduate and postgraduate, and that course talk about racial discrimination, inequalities, sexual orientation, classism of Anglo-Saxons, all kind of poverty, inequality and discrimination are being taught. I brought the book from Massachusetts University. So education is being used as an instrument of social change of youth, so that next generation will not be like the present. Now I end with this, friends, with Dr. Ambedkar's vision that we are talking of nation today, nowadays very, very, very strongly. What should be nation? Some are dubbed as anti-national, some are dubbed as national. So that has come now. Ambedkar in Thoughts on Pakistan, where he discussed the concept of nation. Denying equal right, practicing untouchability, is denying citizenship to a whole lot of people. Citizenship is nothing but enjoyment of certain fundamental right. And to the extent that the untouchability and caste discrimination deny a right, you are not a citizen. And nation can be strong provided you are a citizen. Now, Dr. Ambedkar talks about inclusive nation, developing citizenship. Let me read for you, because it's very difficult to summarize, but therefore I am giving you. The point is that nationality is not primarily a matter of geography, culture, or language. That is what nation is defined today. Nation is not a physical thing in which certain objective characteristics such as commonality of language, race, territory persist. This is not the definition. This doesn't make us nation. Even if you have one religion, one culture, one language, one race, you can't become a nation. Nation, on the contrary, is a spiritual reality, binding people into a deep comradeship. Ambedkar's word. Nationality is the social feeling of corporate sentiment of oneness. It is the feeling of consciousness of a kind, like-mindedness, possessing things in common, in communication, in life of communication, participation and sharing with all those who constitute a nation, sharing their pain and sorrow. In this sense, nation is a society where there is an unlimited scope for social endosmosis. Endosmosis means everybody is involved, everybody is together, everybody share joy and pain of everybody. Nation is a democracy, a mode of associated living, of conjoined communicated experience. So, communication, participation and sharing with all those who constitute one nation is the key thing for a nation. Today, Dalit, Adivasi, nomadic, denominate tribe, women, religious minority in Maharashtra face unequal treatment. We have to recognize that we are still a nation in making. We are not a nation insofar as a large section of the people do not enjoy citizenship right. We are still a nation in making. We are a democracy in making. Dalits are citizen in making. They are not complete citizens. Lot more effort are needed to make the Dalit, Adivasi, women, and nomadic tribe, denotified tribe. Denotified tribe face discrimination of criminal stigma. I just finished a survey on them. Religious minorities, you know that, I need not spell out. These all require citizenship right, then we'll have an inclusive nation in the eyes of Dr. Ambedkar. The resolve to do that will be a great tribute to legacy of Asghar Ali engineer. Thank you very much, gentlemen.